I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council, Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. The time is 2:51 in the afternoon. I apologize for starting 20 minutes late. The subject of this hearing is four measures, consideration of four measures. They are PR 25-500, which is a transfer of jurisdiction, Bill 25-568, which is a dedication of land for alley purposes, Bill 25-614, which is a closing of a public alley, and Bill 25-636, which is also a closing of a public alley. To say more about this, although before I say that, I want to note that the record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 at 5 p.m. Again, 5 p.m. on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. I don't remember if I said at the opening that we're having this hearing in the council hearing room 412 of the Johnny Wilson Building, and this hearing is available on the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov. So to say more about each of these measures, the stated purpose of PR 25-500 is to transfer the jurisdiction of certain real property adjacent to and near the Anacostia Freeway, to transfer it from the U.S. General Services Administration and the National Park Service to the District of Columbia, to facilitate the completion of improvements to the Interstate 295 Malcolm X Avenue interchange. This legislation was introduced at the request of the mayor on October 26th last fall. The full title of the measure is Transfer of Jurisdiction of Lots 287 and 998 in Square 5865, part of Lots 981 and 982 in Square 5865, part of Parcel 240/6, part of Parcel 234/41, and a portion of Reservation 421. SO 14-20429, approval resolution of 2023. Some of those references, parcel numbers, for example, and reservations are references to typically to federal government ownership. The second measure is Bill 25-568, entitled Dedication of Lot 841 in Square 5755 for alley purposes. SO 22-01599, Act of 2023. This legislation was introduced at the request of the mayor on November 7th of 2023. The stated purpose of the bill is to dedicate a portion of private property in squares 5755, lot 841, to widen a public alley so that the owner may develop the adjoining lots with new single-family houses. This is in Ward 8. The third measure is entitled Closing of Public Alley in Square 5051, SO 21-00136, Act of 2023. It's Bill 25-614. It was introduced by Councilmember Vincent Gray on December 4th of 2023. The stated purpose of this measure is to close a public alley stub in Square 5051 to facilitate the redevelopment of the East River Shopping Center. This is in Ward 7. And the fourth measure for consideration today is Bill 25-636. The stated purpose is to close a public alley. Nope, excuse me, I misspoke. Bill 25-636. The stated purpose is to close a 10-foot wide unimproved public alley in Square 3701. This is in Ward 5. It was introduced on December 20th, 2023 by Councilmember Parker. And the full title is Closing of a Public Alley in Square 3701, SO 23-6220, Act of 2023. This is exciting stuff. We've got witnesses for most of these measures. I lied, all of these measures. We're going to take them in order. PR 25-500. I didn't lie. There are no witnesses for that. We will have the surveyor and a representative of DDOT come forward at the end of the hearing. So I'm going to go to the next measure. So we have no witnesses for the transfer of jurisdiction. We have no public witnesses, citizen witnesses for the transfer of jurisdiction related to the interchange of Interstate 295 and Malcolm X. So we will go to Bill 25-568, which is the dedication of Lot 841 in square set 5755, dedication for alley purposes. We have two witnesses, Manish Palawal and Eric DeBear.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. Are you both together?
We are, and I have a brief presentation to give as well.
Excellent. Please proceed.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I have a PowerPoint, but it says screen sharing is disabled, so I'll just go ahead with my statement. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson. My name is Eric DeBear from the law firm of Cozen O'Connor. I am land use counsel for the applicant Residential Redevelopment LLC. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief statement in support of the legislation before the Committee of the Whole today, which is under B25-0568. My client, Mr. Paliwal of Residential Redevelopment LLC, is also available for questions should you have any for the property owner. In December 2021, my client filed an application with the surveyor's office to dedicate lot 841 in square 5755 to widen an adjacent 20-foot alley. The application was filed in furtherance of my client's proposed redevelopment of 4 lots on W Street Southeast in Anacostia. My client's goal is to build a new single-family home on each of the 4 lots. 2 of the lots, lot 837 and 838, have frontage on W Street Southeast and can be improved without need to widen the alley. However, lots 839 and 840 do not have street frontage and are deemed to be alley lots. Under the DC zoning regulations, in order to obtain buildable record lots, these 2 lots must be adjacent to an alley that is at least 24 feet in width. As such, Residential Redevelopment LLC seeks to dedicate lot 841, which is 4 feet in width by 160 feet in length, to widen the public alley to the required 24 feet. If the legislation is enacted, my client will pursue a new single-family home on each of the 2 alley lots. As part of the application process, all necessary agencies reviewed and supported the proposed dedication legislation, including the Office of Planning, Department of Transportation, Fire and Emergency Services, and Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8A. DDOT's report requested the applicant meet several conditions prior to recordation of the plat to expand the alley, including to pave 16 feet of the alley and construct a new sidewalk and green space next to the alley. My client has no objections to these conditions, which have been incorporated into the proposed legislation under Section 3 that is being considered by the committee today. In sum, the proposed alley dedication will serve the public interest by allowing residential redevelopment to bring 2 additional family-sized homes to the Anacostia neighborhood. We thank you for your time and consideration of this legislation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. DeBear. Does Mr. Palawal have a statement?
He does not have a direct statement, Chairman. If the committee has any direct questions for him as the property owner and developer, he'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. So I know you spoke to this, but I'm looking at DDOT's testimony. They outline a number of conditions. As I said, I know you spoke to, but I'm going to just go over this anyway. The applicant applies for and obtains a public space permit for the construction of the public space improvements on the expanded alley as one project. And you have no objection?
Nope.
And Mr. Palawal is here, so. The second is the applicant enters into a project-specific mitigation agreement with DDOT for the payment of the design review and inspection costs for the public space improvements, and you have no objection?
No.
The third is prior to obtaining building permits for the adjacent lots, the applicant must post a bond for the cost of construction of the public space improvements, and you have no objection?
Nope.
And the fourth is DDOT has confirmed that the public space improvements on the expanded alley have been constructed to DDOT standards and specifications and in accordance with the public space permit. All statutory warranties have been provided, and DDOT has agreed to accept the improvements into the DDOT portfolio. And you have no objection to that.
No objection.
Give me just a second. Mr. DeBear, are you aware of any community opposition?
No, none.
And has the ANC commented?
The ANC provided a report that's in the package sent to the committee, and they supported this proposal.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you. Part of the hearing process is to make sure everything is okay, but also to give the public an opportunity if they have concerns. The record will be open, but I'm not hearing objections, so thank you for your testimony. You know who to work with on the committee, the whole staff, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so any follow-up work with Mr. Stum. Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Chairman, should we wait around for post
Oh,
DDOT
yeah,
and
you
surveyor?
might. You might. I doubt there'll be an issue. Since
Okay.
I think DDOT's good. Of course, I didn't look at the surveyor's testimony, but
I'll stick around. Thank you.
okay,
Thank you, Chairman.
thank you. So we'll turn to Bill 25-61. All right, we're going to turn now to Bill 25-614. That's the alley, closing of a public alley in square 5051. There are 4 witnesses. Looks to me like 2 are with the developer. 1 is listed as a public witness, and then there's an ANC commissioner. So let me call them all in. Paul Tummons, who's with Golston and Stoll. Jerome Nichols, who's president of Standard Real Estate Investment. Dr. Christopher Carr and Ashley Ruff. Ms. Ruff is a ANC commissioner with ANC 7F02. All right, why don't we begin with Mr. Tummons?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Gray. Good afternoon. I am Paul Tummons of the Golston Estates. I serve as land use counsel for the applicant. As you know, we have 1 witness here this afternoon, Jerome Nichols, president of Standard Real Estate Investments. We submitted our written statement and materials in support of the proposed alley closing on February 16th, 2024. As noted in the statement, this application satisfies all applicable requirements of the DC Code, will further the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and is an integral component of creating the Northeast Heights Town Center project. With that, I will now ask Mr. Nichols to present his testimony.
Great, thanks, Paul. How's my sound, everyone?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was asking how my sound is. I guess it's not great.
No, you are coming in quite loud and clear.
Perfect. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of the Whole. Thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony in support of Bill 25-614. My name is Jerome Nichols. I'm president, co-founder of Standard Real Estate Investments. Our company is the owner of the majority of the property that will become the Northeast Heights Town Center project. Standard is a minority controlled and owned real estate firm that manages capital on behalf of institutions. Our current focus is on workforce housing and industrial projects. The town center will include a new headquarters for the district's DGS, Department of General Services, which opened last year in June. It'll also include a new full-service grocery store, approximately 1,350 residential units, and approximately 130,000 feet of retail to include restaurants and service uses. The town center will also help to achieve the vision of what we want to have as downtown Ward 7 at the intersection of Minnesota Avenue and Benning Road. Minnesota will be invigorated with lively urban corridor retail, and Benning Road will be activated with a vibrant streetscape that will benefit the adjacent library, Benning Road Neighborhood Library, and also Marshall Heights Community Development Center that's right next door. So the property that's subject of this alley closing hearing today is known as the south parcel of the town center. The south parcel is bound by Minnesota to the west, Dix to the north, 40th Street to the east, and then the remaining public alley behind it, along with Clay Place to the south. The south parcel is currently improved with 2 retail and office buildings that use the alley that we're talking about as a driveway from Dix to get into the property. And they access their surface parking from that location. We're proposing to demolish both of these buildings over time and redevelop that space at the south lot, the south parcel, as a new office building that'll have ground floor retail on Dix Street, excuse me. It'll be an important component of the town center. So I think we have some renderings, but we can show those in a second. But this new office, we believe, will help to revitalize the immediate area. It'll have quality architecture and help with office tenants who need lunch and all those good things, but also residents that live in the neighborhood. So we're excited to answer questions. Happy to participate and be here around what we think is going to be a great transforming project for downtown Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. So what you propose will be one building that will cover both of these lots, 28 and 29?
That's right. So the 2 lots, if you drive by, it looks almost like a parking lot between them, but really it's the alley we're talking about. And they use the alley to access kind of drive-in parking spaces on both sides of the alley. So
I'm sorry, Jerome, I'm not sure. Can people see? I pulled up on the screen here.
I can see it.
Yes. So exactly. So maybe there are existing buildings on 28, 29. Here's the public alley stub we called. In effect, that's really just used right now for cars come in to park these 2 separate buildings. The proposal is we close this alley that would allow for this building as viewed so this is right now the alley is approximately there. This is the view from roughly Minnesota Avenue, basically looking this way towards the building. And then this is the view from really Dix Street, this alley, the alley system that will remain looking back. And you can see the DGS building in the background.
Mr. Nichols, were you about to say something more?
No, the same thing that Paul just said about collapsing the alley between 28 and 29, and he was articulate about that with the drawing.
This used to be the development site that Cedar Realty Trust was looking at?
That's correct. We purchased the site from shortly after Cedar owned it. There was an interim owner for a small handful of months, but it's the same site. You're correct.
Okay, let me get the other two witnesses and then I'll ask my colleague if he has any questions. Dr. Christopher Ruff, Christopher Carr? I don't believe he's here. Commissioner Ashley Ruff? I think she's not here. Interesting. Councilmember Gray, do you have any questions?
Not, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the work that's been done to get to this stage. Appreciate the work of Mr. Cummins also. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me just a second. Mr. Nichols or Mr. Tummons, is there any community opposition to this project? To this project, or in particular, this alley closing?
No,
None that we're aware of.
And where's the ANC on this?
The ANC drafted a letter in support, resolution in support, and that is part of the application package.
Okay. Councilmember Gray? I already recognized you. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I did not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the effort to bring us together on this. All right.
Okay, actually, let me look at the DDOT testimony.
If I can address that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I haven't said anything yet, but we'll address it and then we'll find out if there's something I don't have in front of me.
Gotcha. So the DDOT report conditioned, the DDOT was in support of the alley closing with one condition. And that condition was, now if you can see my screen here, the adjacent property, for those who may be able to picture site, is a McDonald's with a drive-through, approximately right here. The DDOT report requests that prior to the council approving this alley closing application, the applicant submit either a tree preservation plan or tree removal permits for the trees located on the adjacent property. We conveyed to DDOT that this alley closing is important to allow Standard to move forward with the development of the site, but we're not entirely sure when that development will occur. So what we had proposed is that rather than tying any sort of tree preservation plan or actual removal of a tree on an adjacent property, that would be part of the natural building permit process for these buildings rather than tied to, like, for lack of a better term, holding up this alley closing from moving forward.
Why are you responsible for trees on adjacent property, or is that property that you control?
It is not property we control.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I guess I'm punting on your first question of why are we responsible for a tree on someone else's property, and I'm answering your question of that is not our property. That is not something we can control. I think it is standard for us when you are doing work that you have a tree preservation plan for properties on adjacent property. But again, it's not something we can control, and we can't go and tear down their tree on their property, and also the McDonald's property.
Okay. Well, this hearing's getting more exciting.
No comment.
All right, I don't have any other questions for you, but maybe stick around just in case.
Absolutely.
The next bill is Bill 25-636. And that is, all right, did I jump ahead? Yeah. That is closing of a public alley in Square 3701. That's, so I believe, the Ward 5. So we have Jeff Utz, who's also with Goldston and Stores, Neil Madraja, Philippe Serpa. Both of those individuals are owners at 5335 First Place, or with 5335 First Place Owner LLC. Shane Detman, who's with Golston and Stores, Sean Pichon, Principal at Michael Graves Architects, Kyle Oliver, President of Vica Engineers, and Sunil Charles, who's Associate Member of Vica Engineers. It sounds like all of these folks are associated with the applicant, am I correct?
Correct.
So you didn't want to face me alone, you had to bring like 6 people?
Well, the plan is just to have people available for questions. Really only Felipe and I will speak.
Okay. When you're ready.
Great, thank you so much. Could we pull up the presentation if that is possible, or can I just go ahead and share my screen?
It seems to be possible.
Great. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Gray, and members of the Committee of the Whole and staff. My name is Jeff Utz of Goulston and Stores. I'm legal counsel for the applicant in this proceeding. Thank you for the opportunity to present this application to close an unimproved public alley in Square 3701, abutting and separating lots 85 and 88. These lots have the addresses of 115 Riggs Road and 5332 First Place, Northeast. The subject alley is a paper alley, which has a width of approximately 10 feet and an area of approximately 1,230 square feet. The paper alley is part of a larger paper alley network that was placed on Square 3701, but was not implemented, likely due to topographical changes. The paper alley runs directly through the middle of the 2 development parcels. The application satisfies all applicable requirements of DC Code Section 9202. The alley is not necessary for alley or other transportation purposes and can be closed without disrupting vehicular access to any property. This is proven by the current nature of the alley, which is unimproved and unpassable, leading to a north-south paper alley segment that is similarly unimproved and impassable. The closing of the paper alley, which is shown here, will allow for the creation of a single record lot and provide the opportunity for the development of an affordable housing project containing approximately 104 new dwelling units and parking. The alley closing unlocks the potential for these parcels to be changed from underutilized and vacant lots to a new multifamily building, contributing much needed affordable housing at a transit-oriented location, all without displacement. With me today is Felipe Serpa of the applicant, who will provide an overview of the applicant, its partners in the project. And as mentioned, we also have other members of the development team available for questions as needed. The applicant's pre-hearing statement contains a detailed analysis of the consistency of the application and the project it unlocks with the comprehensive plan and the Riggs Road and South Dakota Avenue small area plan. The closure of the paper alley is in accordance with the elements of the comprehensive plan, the upper northeast area element, and allows for the small area plan to be implemented at the site. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Felipe.
Thank you.
When you're
Jeff.
ready, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the Committee of the Whole, and staff. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Felipe Serpa. I'm a principal with the Valor Companies, LLC. I've been a real estate developer in the district since 2015, initially as an employee of prominent local developers, but most recently as a principal with Valor, like I mentioned. I've experience with all types of residential developments, but I'm most proud of the significant affordable housing developments that I've helped get financed, entitled, and constructed over the past half decade. I'm here today as a representative of 552 First Place Owner LLC, which is an affiliate of the Valor Companies and is the applicant in the proposed alley closing application that we're looking at today. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present this application to close an unimproved segment of a public alley, which is necessary in order to consolidate, like Jeff had mentioned, the immediately abutting properties into a single record lot and to advance an all affordable project on the resulting consolidated site. This project is a partnership between my firm, Valor, and Impact DMV Church, who's across the street. They currently own one of the lots abutting the alley, which is to be closed. And I know that I speak for the whole team when I say I'm grateful for the partnership with Impact DMV and for the support the church leadership and its membership has afforded us. As Mr. Utz mentioned, The proposed project will be constructed fully by right in accordance with the existing zoning and is expected to contain approximately 104 new affordable dwelling units within close proximity to Metro Rail. The project will also contain parking spaces, including some dedicated for the church's use. The new affordable housing will also be in proximity to neighborhood amenities such as retail services and other uses, the Metropolitan Branch Trail, parks and recreation areas, and schools. At this time, the development team is in the process of putting together its financing application. We anticipate to submit this to DHCD during the next open call for funding. Assuming we are selected, we would anticipate moving forward quickly thereafter with the goal of delivering as soon as possible. In addition to funding, the successful closure of the subject unimproved segment of public alley is critical to the project. Failure to close the alley would quite literally reduce the project by half, perhaps more. We continue to study the site access comments that DDOT has put forth, which I'm sure we will discuss as provided to us. And we are confident we can reach an acceptable solution on that front. I will also note that we have reached out to the properties ANC 5A, me personally and my colleagues several times over the course of the last months. We have not heard back from them yet. However, Ward 5 Council Member's office has been helpful. They also reached out to obtain feedback from the ANC, but the ANC has not responded to them either. Of course, our team will remain engaged with neighbors in the community throughout the process, and we'll continue to provide out this sort of outreach. And then finally, as Mr. Odds also mentioned, regardless of how the site access is accomplished at the southern end of the project, the segment of unimproved alley that is the subject of this application must be closed to advance the project. Closure of the subject alley in no way approves the exact design or site access that is depicted in these conceptual drawings submitted to the record that we're looking at here. It does not eliminate the requirement for us to go through the DDOT public space approval process. We will continue to coordinate with DDOT on resolving any site access issues in advance of and during the public space approval process. And with that, thank you for the opportunity to testify here and happy to answer any questions at the conclusion of the presentation, which I'll turn over to Mr. Utz.
Great. Thanks, Felipe. The last thing, I'm sorry we're running over. We just wanted to provide a snapshot of the comments in the record. Essentially, most agencies had no objection. We did receive, or I should say not receive comments, as Felipe mentioned, from the ANC and from solid waste, which I believe is the case for applications generally. We did receive an objection until certain conditions are met from DDOT, and then we received a report of no objection subject to those same conditions being implemented as well. I'm happy to speak to the specifics of the DDOT conditions. Essentially, the team is able to meet in part the first condition that DDOT put forward regarding obtaining public space permit approvals for the site access. We would not wish to commit to the specific southern access element, essentially obtaining site access through the southern alley only that condition puts forward. We would prefer to have the flexibility of simply obtaining public space access from public space and leave it at that, all of which DDOT would completely control. The other two aspects of the DDOT conditions relate to the Metropolitan Branch Trail interaction with the property and essentially setting off 10 feet from portions of the curb ramp. We would prefer to defer that to the public space permit process as well, rather than conditioning this on that. And then similar to the prior application, there was a request for tree protection plan and the permits relating to special trees to be in hand. And we would, again, prefer for that to occur in the future rather than now, when this project will come in for its typical permit process. With that, we are happy to answer any questions. And again, apologize for running over and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sure, there's no problem with the running over. So this is near Riggs Road. I'm a little bit confused. If you could show me something that orients me a little better than the surveyor's plat.
Mhm.
So Riggs Road is along left to right at the top,
Correct.
and First Street is north, south, up and down there. The alley runs off of First Street.
It
You
does.
said connects with another unimproved alley?
It does. So there is a paper alley. The topographical change at the rear is pretty significant. So it is a large paper alley that actually then connects to a paper street. This is Ingraham. Just due to the topography, there's a series of public space that is unimproved. So yes, this east-west alley that's the subject of this application is a paper alley that connects to a paper alley.
Okay, now there are paper alleys and there are paper alleys. So is this well, this would be a dedicated, unimproved paper alley.
Yes.
Is Ingraham dedicated and unimproved?
It is dedicated and unimproved. Yes.
Okay. And the applicant owns the two lots, which I believe are 85 and 88, or controls, or is in a partnership to develop lots 85 and 88.
That's correct. Yes, I control.
And the alley closing then allows you to combine the two lots,
Yes, sir. That's the idea.
otherwise known as subdividing, which makes no sense because we're actually sub-adding, but
Step adding.
the
Yes.
phrase is subdividing.
Right.
You contacted the ANC. The ANC has not responded.
That's correct.
What about other community sentiment?
Well, Jeff, can I speak to that?
Sure, please.
Well, obviously the church across the street is the main, most immediate community member. They are supportive. The deal that we have with them includes providing parking for the church and the eventual development, like we mentioned. The southern portion, lot 88, is owned by a union that's also across the street. As far as immediate community involvement, we are abutting parkland for the most part. Lot 801 is vacant, Ford Circle Park. So as far as sentiment from any immediate neighbors, we really haven't had outreach to immediate neighbors, save the church and the union. No negative sentiment to speak of. I will say that we have made multiple attempts with ANC. The SMD had been vacant. So that was the initial feedback that we got, but we'll continue to provide outreach, to conduct outreach, I should say, to through the ANC.
South of lot 88, it looks like there are 3 smaller lots.
That's
Are
correct.
those improved?
Two of them are unimproved, 72 and 71. The third is improved. I believe it's vacant, but don't take that to the bank.
So what about
think-
those property owners?
We have been in touch with the owners of 72 and 71 within the framework of potentially adding it to the assembly. But that really hasn't gone anywhere. But no objection from them. They're out of state, out of the district.
Are they individuals or corporate? Do you know?
I dealt with an individual. I'm assuming they're individuals, but I don't have the exact details of the
Are
ownership.
those properties residential or non-residential?
I believe they should be R1 as well.
It should be what?
Yeah, so
R1 residential.
they're zoned MU, but there is
MU, excuse me.
nothing. Yeah, there's nothing there currently. This is actually, I believe, a cell phone or similar kind of antenna.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry, Jeff. Jeff's correct. That is owned by a corporation out of state. It's an antenna of some sort.
Okay. The union is Laborers International?
Yes. local 55 it was, I think. You can look.
It doesn't sound right, but it doesn't matter. Mr. Utz, I know you touched on this, but I'm going to go over it anyway. The DDOT says, following conditions. The applicant revises the site plan to include a DDOT compliant site access that utilizes the existing paper alley network to the west or south of the project and secures required public space permits.
Mhm.
That's kind of a mouthful. Can you translate that? And I think you said you'd prefer not.
Yes, so we are happy to have a condition that the applicant will obtain public space permits for access to parking and loading, but would prefer that it's left there. The DDOT condition sketches out access from this southern alley. This is another unimproved alley that exists immediately to the south of Lot 88. Or when they talk about the alley to the west, that's the one that we were talking about before, potentially coming down to Ingraham and then figuring out the access from Ingraham going out to First. But we would prefer instead to not require that specific access and instead leave it open-ended so that a public space permit for access would be required, period. And then let the dialogue with DDOT during the public space process play out in the most kind of advantageous manner when the details can be shared during the public space committee hearing and the related meetings.
Is some of this because you don't like the unimproved alley to the west, since you said there's a very steep topographical change and it is unimproved?
That is related to it, yes. And our team has studied access from the southern alley, and that topography essentially complicates access from that alley as well. So we just did not want to have this requirement baked into the alley closing application when there might need to be an alternative solution found through the DDOT public space permitting process later.
Well, the only alternatives would be access off of Riggs or access off of First.
Correct. Yes. The team has looked at the access through the southern alley and how that might be achieved. The topographical change has required the installation of retaining walls and then potentially the regrading, at least to a degree, of portions of the southern owner's lots. So it's a more complicated question than it seemed like it would be at first, I think, maybe when that condition was drafted.
This is 104 units,
Correct. Yep.
and it's like a 5-minute walk to the metro station
That's right.
Correct.
and numerous bus lines. So do you have you done a traffic analysis with regard to how many folks are going to have cars?
Not yet, not at this juncture.
Well, ordinarily, a public space permit isn't required for ingress egress to a building. Am I correct?
So we would need one for the curb cut wherever it lands. These curb cuts for the existing alleys are only 10 feet. So we would need to obtain a wider curb cut regardless of where it lands to give this building its parking and its loading. So the public space permitting process for the curb cut and for other elements is an inevitability for the development here.
So by that reasoning, we wouldn't need to make this conditioned on a public space permit because you'd need a public space permit anyway.
Correct.
But then isn't it a little bit premature for the council to act on this if you haven't figured out your site plan?
So we don't think so. This question is so fundamental to the ability to assemble this site. It is literally the kind of first existential question regarding the ability to put together lots 85 and 88. And it's, in this case, with the variety of unimproved alleys, it doesn't eliminate the existence of those alleys. What's proposed here, showing in red, doesn't eliminate the existence of those alleys in a way that kind of satisfies the best of both worlds in our view, the ability to unlock this site while still having this alley network intact around it.
I'm not sure I completely followed that. You lost me when you talked about existentialism. I was thinking
Yeah,
of
sorry.
Nietzsche, and I never read Nietzsche, and so I'm like lost.
Yeah.
But that's my fault. I mean, no shade on you. But it seems to me that the solutions here would be either a curb cut off of First or off of Riggs. I could see that DDOT would not want a curb cut off of Riggs, although you might be able to trade with, I think, Food and Friends. That was a sort of a sarcastic comment, so I'll take that back. It's another site where DDOT's been difficult. But alternatively, you could do something by perhaps changing the ground floor development so that there's more of a wider First Street for ingress, egress. When I'm thinking that way, now I'm thinking, well, wouldn't it be better for all this to get worked out before the council just kind of takes away this lever for DDOT? I'm more than happy to give DDOT a hard time, but I'm just not getting why we wouldn't want this a little bit better designed. Let me also add, based on what I'm seeing, I don't see a problem with the alley closing itself. Nobody's using the alley, or at least nobody's using the alley for traffic. And so I don't think that's the existential issue.
Yeah. It's true that this alley is not utilized for traffic at all. It is actually, it's shown here from First Place. It terminates essentially immediately behind this construction fencing. So in this case, the reason that we are sequencing the application in this manner is that the assemblage can't progress beyond the step if we don't have assurance that we can combine these two lots into one record lot.
Well, I can't give you assurance without 7 members voting, but I can say I don't see an issue with this. I see the existential issue, just to borrow that term, with the ingress egress, and you don't even have a sketch of a site plan. And I think that if there are ways of modifying First Street, I mean, there are 4 sides to the combined lots. And the west side doesn't sound appetizing, and the south side sounds problematic. And Riggs Road doesn't sound like that's good. So, and I recognize that there would be economics involved in figuring out adjustments to the building to accommodate ingress, egress off of First. But none of that's happened?
So no, so we did submit project plans, and what's showing now is some of the imagery from that. And we have renderings as well. There is a project that exists, and there is a project that is queued up to file for DHCD funding. This alley closure is kind of fundamental towards being able to show that project is real and capable of being achieved. So there is a site plan. There is a site plan that shows access from First Street. That was the initial filing that was submitted as part of the application package. And what is showing here is one of the alternatives that would bring the access off of that southern alley. So there is a concept there, but we would prefer to not lock into it as part of this legislation, that it must come from the southern alley. We are more than happy to commit to DDOT that we will require the public space permit through their typical permitting channels and through the public space committee.
So explain these two, these are two, no, there's one option. So I see the alley on the left. Where's the ingress egress?
So the curb cut is essentially in this area.
A
The-
wider alley.
Yes, exactly. In between the gray dotted line and what's showing here as a bit more solid dark line would be private space that would then be utilized as part of a widened alley. So this would require the public space permit. The portion to the south of the wider dotted gray line is the existing 10-foot alley. So together, this would be approximately 20 to 24 feet, depending on what DDOT would approve.
So
And
that's
that would-
taking about 10 to 14 feet off of the lot for the, I'll call it an alley driveway.
Yeah.
And then how does one get into the building?
So they would turn into this diagonal element, and there is loading that would be fed directly off of that. And then the parking garage would actually, you would take a left once you come in this ramp and go down and into the parking garage.
Okay. Now you've, did you say you also have a plan for First Street?
So that's the plan that exists in the record. So there is, that's what this shows, yes. This is First Street showing on the image on the right. This is
And
the
where's
curb cut.
Yeah.
This is the curb cut that would go entirely into the building. This would be completely off of the alley and just utilizing the curb cut coming off First Street.
Okay, and you or your client have analyzed the pros and cons of these two approaches.
Correct.
So why can't you just decide which one?
In this moment, it feels, I would say, premature to just commit to something that we think can be worked out more readily later during the typical permitting process. We are willing to study it. We have been studying this since DDOT raised the issue, changing from the curb cut that's shown here to the curb cut that's shown here, and we're willing to continue studying it. But we just don't want to have there be a condition to the legislation that locks in this solution if there might be a better solution.
Well, at some point you have to answer the question. The question being, which option? I'm just not getting why you can't answer that question today. And when I say today, I don't mean literally March 20th at this hearing, but there's a reason why you would prefer not to lock it in.
Mm.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
I'll mention one piece of the reasoning. The topography here, as has been alluded to, would create a condition where we would have to use the space of the neighbor to the south for grading purposes. So we would have to engage, find these folks, negotiate with them, and then there would also be significant retaining walls that would have to be built on their land. And Jeff, please correct me if I'm misrepresenting. Sunil from VICA is also on, who's our civil engineer. That is, I would say, the predominant reason as to why the order of operations are the order of operations that we've chosen. This is, a corporation somewhere, with a PO box. I haven't been successful in reaching them.
Yeah, but you don't need to use their land because, as I understand it, you're looking for something like 24 feet. If it's the southern entrance, 24 feet wide, 10 feet would be the existing alley, and 14 feet would be your property. And you could build the retaining wall, obviously with DDOT's approval, on the 10 feet. You don't need to build on the southern neighbor's land.
With
Unless
the current
economically it's not feasible for you to give up 14 feet of your land.
That would be a big change in the economic profile of the project, correct?
But that hasn't actually been the reason that we have struggled with implementing this solution. That the southern alley entrance would require there to be retaining walls constructed in the alley, and then grading to happen on the southern owner's property. So it would be an extensive kind of area that would be subject to this particular implementation to get the clearance to even go into the loading and the parking garage. And we think there should be this opportunity further down the line during the permit process to kind of work with DDOT through these issues in more detail as part of the normal review that the Public Space Committee would do.
Well, I'm spending a lot of time on this and probably more than I should, but it sounds like you don't like the southern alley. So then why don't we just say First Street, which DDOT may not like, but then I can ask DDOT why they don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me go on. There was another bullet here. Applicant revises, let's see, DDOT had a condition. The applicant revises the site plan to ensure consistency between the proposed development and the Metropolitan Branch Trail project, evaluates and mitigates any vehicular turn movements across the Metropolitan Branch Trail to minimize conflicts, and sets the ground floor of the building back from the curb at the intersection of Riggs Road Northeast and First Place Northeast to provide a minimum 10-foot shared use path measured from the top of the adjacent curb ramp. I think I got lost. Is Riggs Road part of the Metropolitan Branch Trail here?
Yes.
So they
Very
want you to set back your building a little bit to provide more space for the trail.
Correct.
Is that correct?
It is correct. Yeah.
And your view of this is?
This is something we would prefer not to link to the alley closing. We are happy to have this discussion as well as part of the public space permit review for this parcel. But in this case, it's not related to the alley closing that we're requesting.
And the third bullet was the applicant demonstrates that they have received approval for a tree preservation plan or tree removal permits for the proposed development.
Correct. It's similar to some of the prior discussion on the prior application. This is something that would again happen during the typical permitting process farther down the line. So we don't think that this particular alley closing application should be linked to the tree preservation plan that will be implemented later.
Well, you're going to have to come up with a tree preservation plan, right?
We will, but the timing here, we would need the alley closure to occur in time for us to create our record lot. The phasing of the permits related to trees would happen significantly later in the process. So the timing doesn't align for when we would need to create the record lot versus when we would be in for permits on the trees and putting together the tree preservation plan.
Give me a second. I'm a little confused. Did I ask you about ANC and you said the ANC's not responded?
Correct. Yes.
Or was that the last one?
That is this case. Yes, we've been in touch with ANC 5A. We haven't had a single member district representative for a number of months now. I think probably around a year. So we've been working, we're trying to work with the chair, and we've engaged the ward council member staff to assist in that effort. But so far, we have not heard back from the ANC on this application.
Okay.
And we're happy to give more detail on kind of the concepts related to that southern alley and the access if you would like. We have folks on the team here who can detail it even more and probably do more justice to it than I did, if you would like us to.
Sure. If somebody wants to add and help me understand.
Great. Shane, I'll throw it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Am I able to share my screen here?
Yes. I said yes without knowing. I don't control the controls.
Mr. Chairman, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So,
That looks like a beautiful First Street.
yes, so this is the view on First
Or
Place
First Place.
looking north towards Riggs. This is the site here. There's a driveway here, a curb cut. One of these curb cuts is the existing unimproved alley. It's actually this one that's being sought to be closed. And you had asked a question of why DDOT doesn't like First Place. I think they like First Place just fine. In terms of using First Place for access, as opposed to a curb cut on Riggs Place and using that north-south unimproved alley. You'll see in the record that with the conceptual plans that were submitted with the application, we were showing a dedicated curb cut directly into the parking and loading facilities for this project, kind of in this location here. This is that southern unimproved alley. And this is the cell tower property on the south side. So right around this location here is the southern unimproved alley. And so when we met with DDOT, they said, well, we don't really support your dedicated curb cut into your parking facilities in this location. We want you to use the unimproved alley on the south. They had said that you don't have to build out the entire thing, just build out a portion of it so that you can get into your building. And our team, right after that meeting, our team looked at that scenario. And we have Sybil on the line to talk about the technical questions if you have any. But in looking at this so far, there's two problems. One is that because of the grade, we're not able to get the headroom that we need off the southern alley to get into the project's loading dock. It's not to say that it can't be done, just given the time of our meeting and the hearing, we couldn't figure out the headroom there. Perhaps the more significant issue is the grading that would have to occur on the neighbor's property. You can see, I mean, this is the unimproved alley. So we would have to bring the grade down in the unimproved alley down to our level, which means we would have to do some substantial retaining walls, but also regrade the neighbor's property in order to allow them to continue to access their property, essentially grading it back towards this red brick building. And so that's kind of where we are with this issue right now. And as Jeff mentioned, you know, DDOT has all the leverage that they need through the public space process. We will continue to work with them on the grade issues and whatnot. I don't think that we're against using the southern alley to access the project. We need a little more time to figure it out, and we can figure that out in coordination with DDOT during the public space process. And if at the end of the day, they feel as if, regardless of what our civil engineers and whatnot find out, if they still think that a southern alley access is what's warranted, you know, they can deny the public space permit, or we can continue to work with them. I think what Jeff mentioned is that regardless if it's a southern alley access or the dedicated curb cut that we were showing in our conceptual plans, the alley that we're proposing to close has to be closed. Otherwise, it cuts the project in half.
Go back in the, yeah, a little bit more. So in the middle of the screen is a telephone pole.
Mhm.
And to the right, which I guess means to the north, is a lower grade than the driveway that I'm seeing.
Correct.
And to use the alley there, the right of way, you would have to excavate, that's the term I'm going to use, in
Mhm.
regrading. And then you would have to put on the left edge, the southern edge, southern edge, you'd have to put a retaining wall. Why would you also have to regrade property unless it's for the property owner on that lot to be able to use that alley to get to their property?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure where the 10-foot alley is, but if we were to use, I think it's right around this location. So this is kind of where the 10-foot alley is. And if we needed a little additional space to get the trucks in, and so this would be the rear wall of the building. So you can see how we're cutting into this grade to bring it down lower, but we still need to get to this level for the neighbor to get up to their building. So we're essentially, there's a retaining wall in here that somehow kind of does this at some point. But we need to grade up to get to this level. Sorry about the pretty bad drawing.
Yeah, yes, it is pretty bad drawing. Okay, now, is there anything else you want to show or explain?
No, sir.
This is helpful. Forgive me for criticizing your drawing. I wasn't serious. I don't think I have any other questions for you all. Why don't you stick around, and now we're going to hear from the surveyor and the manager of policy and legislative affairs for DDOT.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you.
I was worried that this hearing wouldn't be interesting, but who wants to go first? Mr. Snyder, DC Surveyor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, council members, and staff of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Joseph Snyder, the surveyor for the District of Columbia, Department of Buildings. I appear before you today to provide background information on proposed resolution 25-500, Bill 25-568, Bill 25-614, and Bill 25-636. I'd like to begin with proposed resolution 25-500 to approve the transfer jurisdiction of lots 287 and 298 in square 5865, parts of lots 981 and 982 in square 5865, part of parcel 240 at 6, part of parcel 234 at 41, and a portion of reservation 421 from the U.S. General Services Administration and the National Park Service to the District of Columbia. The purpose of proposed resolution 25-500 is to allow for the transfer of jurisdiction to facilitate the completion of improvements to the I-295 Malcolm X Avenue Southeast Interchange. Proposed resolution 25-500 was introduced by Chairman Mendelson. Pursuant to U.S. Code, U.S. General Services Administration approves the transfer of jurisdiction to the District of Columbia as shown on the Surveyor's Office Plat SO 14-20429. Moving on, we have Bill 25-568, dedication of lot 841 in square 5755 for alley purposes, SO 22-01599, Act of 2023, which was introduced by Chairman Mendelson. The purpose of this bill is to dedicate lot 841 in square 5755 for alley purposes in Southeast Washington, D.C. and Ward 8. Tax lot 841 to be dedicated was created by a division of lots shown in the records of the Office of the Surveyor in the assessment and taxation books on page 2893T, recorded September 21, 2021. Title to the dedication has been determined to be held by Residential Redevelopment LLC. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2022, which represents tax year 2023 for the land dedicated for public alley purposes in square 5755 is $4,470. The applicant for this dedication is Residential Redevelopment LLC, which is represented by Cozen O'Connor. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies and utility companies on April 11, 2022. In a letter dated October 11, 2022, DDOT objected to this application. The remaining executive branch agencies have no objections. To date, we have not received any notification from DDOT removing their objections. Utility companies were notified of this application on April 11, 2022. To date, we have not received official comments from DC Public Works Solid Waste Department. The remaining utility companies have no objections. Pursuant to DC official code, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission, NCPC, of this application on April 11, 2022. In a letter dated May 17, 2023, NCPC staff determined that the proposed project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8. The project was also made available for public review on the NCPC website and no comments were received. Accordingly, staff has determined that this project is exempt from commission review. Pursuant to DC official code, Advisory Neighborhood Commission, ANC 8A, was notified of this application on April 11, 2022. In a letter dated December 12, 2022, ANC 8A indicated their support for the proposed dedication. Next, we have Bill 25-614, closing of a public alley in square 5051, SO 21-00136, Act of 2023. This was introduced by Councilmember Gray. This bill would order the closing of a 20-foot wide public alley stub in square 5051 in Northeast Washington, D.C. in Ward 7. The portions of the alley in square 5051 were created by subdivision shown in the Office of the Surveyor in Subdivision Book 124 on page 43, recorded February 8, 1946, and Subdivision Book 127 on page 18, recorded August 26, 1946. Title to the alley could not be determined to be held by the District of Columbia or the United States. The applicant for this application is Cedar East River LLC, represented by Goulston and Stores. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies and utility companies on December 12, 2020, in a letter dated May 21, 2021. DDOT objected to this application. To date, we have not received any comments from DDOT removing their objection. The Office of Planning was notified of this application on December 7, 2020. To date, we have not received any comments from the Office of Planning. The remaining agencies have no objections. Utility companies were notified on December 7, 2020. Washington Gas objects to this application requiring an easement to accommodate existing facilities. The remaining utility companies have no objections to this application. Pursuant to DC official code, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission, NCPC, of this application on December 7, 2020, in a letter dated December 29, 2020. NCPC staff determined that the proposed project falls under an exception listed in Chapter 8. The project was also made available for public review on the NCPC website and no comments were received. Accordingly, the staff has determined that this project is exempt from commission review. Pursuant to DC official code, Advisory Neighborhood Commission, ANC 7F, was notified of this application on December 7, 2020. In a letter dated January 19, 2021, ANC 7F indicated their support for this application. Finally, we have Bill 25-636, closing of a public alley in Square 3701, SO 23-06220, Act of 2023, which was introduced by Councilmember Parker. The purpose of this bill is to order the closing of a 10-foot wide, unimproved public alley in Square 3701, abutting lots 85 and 88 in Northeast Washington, D.C. in Ward 5. The portion of the alley in Square 3701 was created by a subdivision shown in the records of the Office of the Surveyor and Subdivision Book 52 on page 195, recorded May 19, 1915. The title to the alley could not be determined to be held by the District of Columbia or the United States. The applicant for this closing is 5355 First Place Owner LLC, which is represented by Goulston and Stores. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agency of this application on December 13, 2023. To date, we have not received comments from DDOT. The remaining executive branch agencies have no objections. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant utility companies of this application on December 13, 2023. To date, we have not received official comments from DC Public Works Solid Waste. The remaining utility companies have no objections to this application. Pursuant to DC official code, our Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission, NCPC, of this application on December 13, 2023. Pursuant to delegations of authority adopted by the Commission on April 1, 2021, and per DC code, in a statement signed December 29, 2023, determined the proposed closing of a 10-foot alley, 10-foot unimproved public alley in Square 3701, SO 23-06220, would not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan for the national capital, nor would it impact any identified federal interest. Project was made available for public review on the NCPC website. No comments were received. Accordingly, the staff, well, they made their comments. This might be a typo. Pursuant to DC Official Code, Advisory Neighborhood Commission, ANC SMD 5A08, was notified of this application on December 13, 2023. To date, we have not received comments from ANC SMD 5A08. This concludes my testimony. I now welcome any questions you may have.
What was the typo? Did it?
Yeah, on this last one, NCPC actually did review it. And then I have a sentence at the bottom that I'm saying it's exempt from review. That's incorrect. They actually did review it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller, then I'll have questions.
Thank you. I'm going to condense my testimony slightly and skip over maybe bill titles and purposes to save time, if that's all right.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council, staff, and district residents. My name is Brant Miller, and I am the manager of the Policy and Legislative Affairs Division at the District Department of Transportation, commonly referred to as DDOT. I'm here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and DDOT Acting Director Sharon Kirschbaum regarding the following bills: Proposed Resolution 25500, Bill 25568, Bill 25614, and Bill 25636. Proposed Resolution 25500 will approve the transfer of jurisdiction of certain real property adjacent to and near the Anacostia Freeway from the U.S. General Services Administration and the U.S. Department of the Interior National Park Service to the District of Columbia. This transfer of jurisdiction is necessary for the completion of the substantial improvements to the I-295 Malcolm X Avenue Southeast interchange related to the relocation of the Department of Homeland Security to the St. Elizabeth's campus. We ask that council pass this legislation without delay so that this project can be completed. We look forward to council approving Bill 25568, the recordation of the new plat with the proposed 4-foot dedication with the following conditions as outlined in the bill. The applicant applies for and obtains a public space permit for the construction of the public space improvements on the expanded alley as one project. The applicant enters into a project-specific mitigation agreement with DDOT for the payment of the design review and inspection costs for the public space improvements. Prior to obtaining building permits for the adjacent lots, the applicant must post a bond for the cost of construction of the public space improvements, and DDOT has confirmed that the public space improvements on the expanded alley have been constructed to DDOT standards and specifications, and in accordance with the public space permit, all statutory warranties have been provided, and DDOT has agreed to accept the improvements into the DDOT portfolio. As outlined in surveyor's order report filed by DDOT with the DC surveyor on May 21st, 2021, for Bill 25-614, the agency objects to the requested alley closure until the applicant receives approval from the Urban Forestry Division for either a tree preservation plan or tree removal permits for the trees located on adjacent properties that will be impacted by the development. As outlined in the surveyor's order report filed by DDOT with the DC surveyor on February 21st, 2024 for Bill 25-636, the agency objects to the alley closure as currently proposed and recommends that the closure plat not be recorded until all of the following conditions are met. The applicant revises the site plan to include a DDOT compliant site access that utilizes the existing paper alley network to the west or south of the project and secures required public space permits. The applicant revises the site plan to ensure consistency between the proposed development and the Metropolitan Branch Trail or MBT project, evaluates and mitigates any vehicular turn movements across the MBT to minimize conflicts, and sets the ground floor of the building back from the curb at the intersection of Riggs Road Northeast and First Place Northeast to provide a minimum 10-foot shared use path measured from the top of the adjacent curb ramp. And the applicant demonstrates that they have received an approval for a tree preservation plan or tree removal permits for the proposed development. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today. I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. Give me just a sec. So let's take these in order. DDOT has no issue with the transfer of jurisdiction. I'm guessing the DDOT is intimately involved with the project since it's a interchange. Mr. Snyder, why are there 18 pages to the plat?
It's a significant stretch of 295 where there was like new turnouts, signage, a few, I think, lots that were trying, they wanted surety that within the right-of-way space, all that space is under the administrative and jurisdictional possession of DDOT, but then there was some other little space that the Park Service, am I correct in that? So we had to work that out. I mean, this has been going on for like 10 years.
Yeah, I know.
And that was my primary function, was collaborating on the plat, between DDOT, NPS, and my office to just ensure that we got it right and all the geometry is correct.
How long is this in terms of like miles?
I would say a little over 2 miles. My rough guess was right at like 2.5 miles, maybe. It's a fair stretch.
And I assume it's not very wide.
By street width standards, I think it kind of is. Yeah, it's pretty wide. I mean, this is 295 we're talking about, so it's hundreds of feet wide. It's a highway, like not a city highway where, we get it like 90 feet wide or 120 feet wide. This is very wide. Multiple lanes, northbound, multiple lanes southbound. There's a interchange down by Malcolm X.
So it's not just interchange, it's I guess the ramps, I would say the ramps are the lanes leading to or from the interchange.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have any questions? I can't remember all these bills, 614. So I had a question there. I think, Mr. Snyder, you said the only issue with 614, that's the alley dedication, is that DDOT has an objection. Well, I'm going to comment on it. So why is DDOT? I'm going to phrase this the wrong way. No. Oh, I skipped 568. Well, we'll stick with 614. Why is DDOT messing around with trees on somebody else's property?
I'm very happy to answer that question. So a tree root zone is an area around a tree that is
Roughly equal to the canopy.
more or less, yes. It's the measurement of the trunk of the tree at 4.5 feet off the ground, and then you multiply that by a given number of feet, you get a radius of protection. And so for this specific case, my presumption is, and I haven't verified that since this came up earlier, is that the radius falls over the property line into the adjacent property that's being discussed for this bill. So they need to prepare a protection plan or removal plan. My assumption is that it would simply be a protection plan to protect the trees whose critical root zone, which is the larger zone, that falls into the property that they're adjusting.
And what does that look like? That they won't build within the critical root zone?
No, it's to protect the critical root zone during construction. It's simply just to protect it during construction.
I'm trying to remember, this was so long ago. I don't know what the lot occupancy is for the building. Do you recall?
I'm sorry?
I don't recall what the lot occupancy is for the building. Do you recall?
I do not.
Well, they're objecting to this, so.
It sounded like they objected to it because they felt that it was not the appropriate time for this to be a condition, that they thought that it would come later. I think both applicants for this particular example requirement felt that way. But again, the Urban Forestry Division reviews the plan as a part of the surveyor's order report. So it's included in the surveyor's order report that we submit to the
Well,
office
I
of the
don't
surveyor.
recall that we've had this as a condition in previous alley closings. This is a dedication, no, this is a closing. I don't recall this being a condition in previous closings. And wouldn't this be appropriate when the construction permit is applied for?
I can't speak to previous alley closures. Again, the Urban Forestry Division is a standard reviewer for this part of the process. I think that it would be dependent upon the critical root zone interfacing with the adjacent property, which obviously would not happen in every case. So that may explain why it hasn't come up in the past, but they are a reviewer. And if the critical root zone does cross over their property line, then they would provide this objection in the surveyor's order report.
Well, I'm hesitant to make it a condition of the alley closing if there is another opportunity, which is the ordinary opportunity for DDOT or urban forestry to require this protection. The issue for me is not whether there should be protection for the critical root zone, but whether it should be through us. So if there was not an alley closing involved, there still would be the ability for urban forest to, as a condition of the permit, require that.
I believe so, yes.
Can you check and get back to us?
Yes.
Because I don't think I want to use alley closings to do these conditions. But so what I'm hearing from you, though, is the issue is not removal of adjacent property's tree, but rather protecting the critical root zone on the applicant's property.
Correct.
And if that can be dealt with through the ordinary permitting process, I'd like to know why it can't be dealt with through the ordinary permitting process.
Understood. We'll follow up about that.
I jumped over 568. If the applicant has agreed to the 3 conditions, and there were 4, if the applicant has agreed to the 4 conditions, do we need to put them in the bill?
Our position is normally that we would like the force of law to be applicable to our conditions in a surveyor's order report. So yes, would be my response.
Well, like the applicant applies for and obtains a public space permit for the construction. Isn't the public space permit required regardless of whether we put it in here?
For this specific work, I believe so.
So I'm not interested in passing laws to require what the law already requires.
Understood.
Now, the mitigation agreement may not be something that's otherwise required. So
Correct.
I think that leaves us with 636. Um, I'm not sure what to say. The applicant will be required to get DDOT approval for ingress, egress, wherever it is, correct?
For the curb cut into wherever that takes place, that would be correct.
Well, there's an existing curb cut,
Into the alley stub, yes.
but they want to widen that if they go that route.
I believe they want to create a second one that would be next to it, not necessarily widen the existing one.
So, why would we need to require what's already going to be required?
So I think for this particular bill, we are still working with the applicant. We weren't able to file our surveyor's order report until I think the day before the previously scheduled hearing for these bills, due to the time constraints. We're pretty early in the process, so we're still developing. We've communicated the conditions to the applicant. We're still talking to the applicant about those conditions. As soon as yesterday, we were talking about how those conditions could be amended, possibly through an amendment to the surveyor's order report. So we're still talking to them about whether or not using the existing paper alley network to access the building makes the most sense. So I think we're still pretty early in the process, so it's difficult to discuss what would or would not be already required by law that would be a part of the project, because we haven't determined what the final project's going to look like. Because yeah. So I hear what you're saying about the conditions from the previous bill already being required by law and it being.
Correct.
But I think we're not in a, we have provided comments with conditions, but I think we're still discussing those conditions with the applicant. And we're revisiting them and discussing with them how they can be reformed in response to adjusted site plans, which we've asked for.
Well, what's going through my mind is this. DDOT, of course, is concerned about traffic flow, and when there's a construction, whether ingress egress is going to impede traffic flow, in this case on First Place. That's reasonable. But if the curb cut and the ingress egress is into the building and doesn't involve the southern piece, southern edge, that impacts First Place. If the ingress egress is off of that alley, it's exactly the same impact. It's exactly the same impact because you have the same number of vehicles, whether it's loading and unloading or passenger vehicles, residents, whether it's directly into the building off of First Place, or it is to the south of the building off of the alley, utilizing the alley. And I kind of feel like based on the testimony, it's a little unfair for DDOT to insist on the alley. I mean, If I understood correctly, it requires the developer to spend more money for grading and retaining walls, even though it's actually less of their building that gets taken up. I think less of their building, maybe not. Maybe not. Let's go to the second condition. Metropolitan Branch Trail. So the trail runs along Riggs Road at that point?
Correct.
And is this requirement consistent with other projects that have been along the Metropolitan Branch Trail,
Yes,
which is a widening of the private space to make the trail bigger?
I believe so.
Well,
For
that's
this
basi-
specific condition, yes.
that's basically what this does, is if I understand, sir, sets the ground floor of the building back from the curb to provide a minimum 10-foot shared use path. But you're saying this is fairly common for projects along the Metropolitan Branch Trail?
I believe that other projects along the MBT have similar configurations, yes.
And then you have trees on here again.
Correct, for I believe the same reason. With the critical root zone interacting with the property line.
Which again, would otherwise go through a permitting process if it wasn't part of the alley, if they weren't closing an alley.
Yes, I believe so, and we can follow up about
Yeah, no,
where
check
where
up
else
on
that
that.
occurs in the process. If I could comment further on the alley segment
Yes,
quickly. I think, so our designing and engineering manual requires that access be through the alley if the alley is available to the property, which is why that is the condition in the development review here. The difference, the distinction between the configuration that uses the alley and the one provided by provided earlier is that there's two conflict points, right, with the sidewalk. There's two curb cuts, one for the paper alley access, which is what we saw where there's the gate. And then there would be an additional curb cut now for access into the building, but that could be consolidated into one curb cut that would provide access to the building through the existing paper alley. So there is a distinction between the option and the alternative.
that theoretically, if the ingress egress is off of the alley, there's one conflict point.
Correct.
If the ingress egress is a little bit to the north directly into the building, then there would be two conflict points,
Correct.
theoretically.
Yes.
However, it adds substantial cost and complication because there has to be substantial regrading, because actually this alley, it might exist theoretically, but it's never been built, presumably because of the topography.
It is correct that it is currently a paper alley, yes.
I said a
Why
lot
it has
more.
not been improved, I cannot speak to.
Well, it's true that there's nothing to the, let me think for a second, to the west of it. Sounds like there's park over there to the west.
Mm.
But also the topography changes substantially. I mean, I can think of other places where there are unimproved alleys or even streets. And it's because 20-foot grade difference, 40-foot grade difference. But here we would be saying, to follow the manual, we're going to require additional cost on the developer for affordable housing project? Just saying,
Mm.
just an observation. Excuse me for a second. I was asking Mr. Stone if I have any questions for the surveyor. unless I need additional plats. I don't need additional plans, but how come you don't put north-south on your plats? Or put, like,
Yeah.
real streets where it's just an alley so that we can locate where we are?
The plating, unless otherwise noted on a plat, and this has been the way since the 1790s, unless otherwise noted on the plat by the plat itself being rotated, north is directly up on the page from bottom to top.
All right, that's
So
north-south.
if the
Although
images-
the
if it-
transfer of
if-
jurisdiction, you have north-south on it.
Yeah, it's kind of a big, that's kind of a big piece of land. We went ahead and threw one on there. but-
Yeah, maybe an exception proves the rule, okay. So I can always assume that they're north-south unless it says otherwise.
That is correct, unless the property needs to be rotated for that to fit on that particular plat, and then you will see a north arrow on it.
And what about, like putting a street so that there's one of these plats. There's no street. I think. Dix. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I'm a little bit wrong, but there's one street, like I'm looking at the dedication, the alley for dedication.
Hold on, are we on a different set of plat? We're on this
That's
plat.
568, Bill 25-568. I don't know, maybe I'm just complaining.
What were you looking for on?
Well, something that gives more of a location than just W Street on that one, 568. I don't know, where on W
I
Street?
tell you what I'm willing to do is I'll make sure that for each one of these, I'll have a nicely done GIS printout. Like I hesitate to break from our 225-year long established platting history and myself, Joe Snyder, be the one surveyor who took a radical turn left on our platting convention. I would do it for you, but
So we're following the tradition of George Washington,
no, it started out with
Thomas
here,
Jefferson.
well, it's actually started out with the King of England because the first pieces of land for the district were land grants. But Pierre Lafont, Andrew Ellicott, the list goes on.
Okay, I think I've lost.
But I can do some kind of a vicinity map for you. I will do something nice for every one of these moving forward.
As a
You-
separate, an
Yeah.
additional page.
Yep.
Yeah, that actually would help, I think.
It wouldn't
That
be
would
part of the plat, but it'll be just something you'll have in front of you so that you get, so that you have a reference while we're having these hearings that you can quickly look at, identify, and familiarize yourself with the neighborhood.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions at this time. Mr. Miller, you're going to get back to us with some more information. Appreciate that. I appreciate your testimony. I want to say like in the name of King George, but that would be inappropriate, but I am going to wind down this hearing. The record, as I indicated before, closes in 2 weeks, 5 p.m. on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. I want to thank all of the witnesses, including the 2 government representatives in front of me. The time is 4:35 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.